Hello and welcome to Emsi Webinars. Today we have Richard Hewitt with us, who is the Emsi Burning Glass UK Director of Higher Education. He's going to be discussing using global data for higher education recruitment. If you have any questions during the course of the webinar, please put them in the questions box on your GoToWebinar control panel, and we will endeavour to get to those at the end of the presentation. If not, we will follow up afterwards. You will get a recording and the slides in a follow-up email, so please keep your eye open for that. And without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to you, Richard. Hello, Richard.
Hello, and nice to welcome everyone to the webinar. Thank you very much for joining me today, and thank you, Debbie, for the introduction there. And in today's session, really what I want to do is just show you some of the data that institutions here and elsewhere, particularly in North America, are using to help them engage or target potential prospective students right across the world. I think many of you will already be familiar with using labour market data and skills data to really understand what's happening in a particular country. To go, I think most people here today are UK based, so we'll be familiar with really digging down into skills trends and understanding hotspots in a particular part of a country, identifying employers that are seeking particular skill sets, understanding the transferability of skills, and all of the kind of things that we often talk about on the Emsi Burning Glass webinars. And but we do have data that goes beyond the UK, and I know there are those of you who are already using not only our UK tools, but using the US version of those, the Canadian version of those, and the job postings data and Labour Insight for Australia and New Zealand. So there are certainly many of you who are used to going deep into the data for specific countries, but sometimes that's not what people need to do. Sometimes we need to be able to look across country markets, and we need to be able to answer questions relatively quickly. We're not always looking to do a deep dive analysis of lots and lots of raw data, and sometimes we need some indicators that can point us in the right direction. Now, as it happens, we happen to have data that will help do that, and it's not a small matter either, because it's very difficult to do, and in order to do it well, you need a lot of data. Fortunately, we're a data company, and this is something that's a real priority for us to continue to invest in and build out. So this is certainly not an endpoint that I'm giving you a flavour of today. But hopefully gives you a sense of the kind of things that are possible. So if you don't need to see. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. I'll just share my screen again. What I meant to do was turn off my face. There we go. That looks far better. So there are certain questions that you might want to be asking. So and these questions perhaps are changing. Or there are new questions that we can add to the typical questions that you might be asking, particularly when you're thinking about international programs that seek to attract students from around the world. And well, we all know historically there's been a reliance on having partners on the ground, agencies, working with pathway organizations, institutional partnerships, so peer partnerships, university to university, and so on. And what I'm about to talk about isn't saying that that doesn't work. Of course it works, and it's worked for years. And I'm not saying it's outmoded either. There is very much a place for that kind of on-the-ground operation in the world. And I'm sure that many of those, if not all of those organizations, will be adapting and modernizing as the world changes around them, and those that don't will clearly slip away. But there is now data available that can help with direct recruitment, and by helping institutions target their markets with digital campaigns more effectively, so connecting provision, or perhaps, depending on how you're set up, even guiding provision to where there is likely to be demand in the labour market for the skills people are developing and need. And this is particularly effective for short online courses, postgraduate courses, where the labour market outcomes is really a more tangible factor and pressing for the market relative to how it might be for undergraduate provision, perhaps. But also with those types of campaigns, you can be agile. You can identify something that's particularly hot at the moment. You can tap into trends, and also you don't have to go for blanket coverage. You can be targeted, and if you know where to target, then you can certainly have a more cost-effective approach to what you're doing. And so a lot of the data that we're going to have a look at can be used in different ways to answer different questions. I'm certainly not suggesting this is the limit to the number of questions that we might be answering with the data I'll be sharing, but hopefully it will give you a sense of, right, well, if this kind of data is available, then what are the other questions we might ask of it as well? Because there's always a lot of flexibility with our data. The way that we build it is always geared towards being able to approach it from different directions. So when we are thinking about how we can look across the world at one time, rather than just looking at maybe one country in depth, that presents some challenges from a data perspective. So each country thinks about data and treats data in different ways. And if you think about it, the way every single government collects data is not unified. The way the British do it is different to the way the Americans do it. Although there's a lot of similarities, it is, when it comes to treating the data, it is very, very different. Every European country is different, which is why European Union is trying to streamline that. But then you have parallel data sets, European data sets and individual European country data sets. You have then countries in very different parts of the world, you know, Southeast Asia. If you look at somewhere like the Philippines and you look at how they count occupations, it's very, very different to the way it will be done in our country. You know, from hundreds of SOC codes to tens of SOC codes, occupation classifications, that is. And so that makes it very difficult to take your traditional labour market insight that looks at counting jobs as reported by the government and look at it across a level playing field. It is very, very difficult to do that. And so, but that data doesn't mean that data isn't useful, but it's difficult to standardize. There's other data, however, that is more unified across countries, because it's this more contemporary labour market insight. And so things like worker profiles, and these are it's a bit like CV or resume data, where people might be applying for a job through a third-party HR portal, and they opt in to share their data for analytics, or it might be a public social profile, or it could be where they upload their data to a jobs board to be registered there and opt in to have their data shown for analytics. There are lots of different places this data becomes available, and it's anonymized, and therefore we're able to see how workers describe themselves in the labor market across countries. And what we can do is apply standardized ways of reading those so that they are meaningful across countries as well. And by the way, when it comes to languages, what we don't do is translate all of those into English and deal with a poor translation. All of our algorithms are set to work in different foreign languages, and of course we also use English language profiles because those exist in huge quantities around the world, where English is often the language of business, as we all know. So profiles data is really helpful, and we have around 230 million profiles right across the world that we've tagged with using our standardized taxonomies, and we've got data from the Americas, Europe, Africa, South Asia, Southeast Asia, East Asia, Australia, New Zealand, and so on. We have, as I mentioned, structural data, and we do have that, and we bring together that, and to make sense of it, we combine it with our profiles data, and when we do that, it allows us to estimate population size by occupation, and even getting a sense of how dense a skill may be within a population, the significance of that skill within that population. And we have that for around about 50 countries and territories around the world. We also have, as people will be very familiar with our data, online job postings data, and that's something we've been working to build out. We have that for 17 countries. That's growing all the time, and that gives a sense of active recruitment that's happening, and we can track that and see what the trends are, which companies are recruiting for similar profiles across countries, for example, or what the hotspots are for particular recruitment areas in an individual country, or maybe what one company is doing across the world. So lots of different ways that we can do that. Now, as I said, if we're looking at multiple countries in one go, we need to have routes to standardizing data, so we don't have to do it country by country. And the things that we need to standardize are things like the skills language, the occupations, job titles, companies. All of those different variables need to be standardized so we can make that meaningful, and we do all of that work. The other aspect is geography. How do we deal with that? And the main way that we deal with it is huge, large metropolitan regions, urban areas. Because if you think about it, particularly when you're drawing a lot of data from CVs and profiles and job postings, you know, if you've got let's use a UK example, if you have someone who is perhaps from Epsom or Woking near London, will they write they're from Epsom or Woking, or might they categorize themselves as being from London, particularly if they're thinking their audience may not be particularly local to where they are. It's similar with places like San Francisco and that whole area. Everyone says they're from there rather than a town outside of that part of the world that no one will have heard of. It has more cachet to say you're from the large city. And so we use the large metropolitan regions to create those meaningful buckets as well. So taking different types of data, combining them together, using different types of data to answer slightly different questions, and standardizing taxonomies so that we can look at those across the board at once. So going to have a look at some of that data to see what that means in practice. So if we were to do a search, and this was for Emea, primarily, and thinking about, okay, where can we find analysts and data scientists? That's one of our categories in our global occupations that we have in the data. And then thinking about those by the range of population size, and taking the midpoint from that to understand, well, where are we most likely to find analysts and data scientists in the labor market? And this is what we can see from that for this part of the world. Now, what we're not answering directly is saying, well, what we're not doing is saying, right, all of these people want to go and do a course in data science. That's not the question we're answering directly there. That's not the answer we're giving. What we're saying is that these are significant places with in terms of their population of data scientists, and that indicates that there is likely to be value in people being able to work in data science, because they have those jobs. That's where they're working, and so therefore that is something that is useful. And therefore, if you have a program that targets that course area, then these might be the places that you would want to start thinking about targeting first and prioritizing in any kind of digital campaign. That's where you're more likely to find interest in doing that kind of program. And of course, there will be people who are part of that population already in the labor market who might want to upskill and move up with what they've got. And so there could be market with and demand within that population. But what we're saying is there will be people wanting to access those labor markets in those areas, and so your courses could be relevant to those and have value. If we look at a slightly different one, so looking across different markets for marketing, and here primarily focusing on South Asia, Southeast Asia, and Australia. And the way we get to this is combining our profile insights with the structural economic data, and from that we're able to make those estimates of population size by occupation. And as I said, you know, we're not saying that everyone already in labor market working in marketing will want to do a marketing course. That's not what we're saying, but we can infer there will be demand because the subject area has value in the labor market in those regions. So that's the kind of thing that we're looking at here. So let's dig down a little bit. We've seen, okay, the labor market is quite interesting for marketers in India. So let's look at that in a bit more detail. So we can dig down into the individual country, but the point of being able to do this, one, you can access data for countries where maybe there isn't a tool that will give you lots and lots of in-depth labor market data, but allow you to look between countries and dig down. So if we're looking at India, we've identified India as an interesting place. okay, we can see there's value in marketing in India, but what else can we learn about it? So we could dig down into our professional profiles to learn a bit more, and we have over 1 million of those, about 1.12 million of those profiles currently in India, and the numbers involved here increase all the time. Our data sets are expanding constantly, but we have a look at what we can see. So first of all, where in India, which of these large metropolitan regions do we think we might find them? This is using our profiles data rather than the structural economic data, but we can see where we've got the most insights from. Importantly, though, we can also see where they're working. So these are the employers of the people that we're featuring in our profiles data. So who are the companies? Which are the companies that are employing these people and that have therefore demand for marketers? And knowing who the companies are, again, is important, because you might want to be talking to those companies about their employees and how you might support them. You might be wanting to talk to your students about which companies they might want to be able to access. You might even, one of the things you could do is filter this data even further and just choose, I don't know, Google in India and for marketers, and then you get a look at the other data sets we're about to see, things like skills. Then it gives you a really good sense of what they're looking for. And you might compare that with other countries. Maybe they're looking for different skill sets in different countries, but also you can see commonalities or compare Google versus Amazon, that kind of thing, and feed that back to your course teams, feed it back to your careers people, or indeed that might play a role in the kind of digital marketing campaign that you might be running. Again, if you're able to talk to your audience about what their employers or their target employers from their perspective might be wanting, you've got data to support that, then that can be a very engaging and meaningful conversation. So it's highly useful. So I talked about some of the other bits of data. Marketers is quite generic. So we can apply our job title library on method of normalizing job titles so we can count them. It's still a highly, let's say, diversified library. I think when we started in the English language, we had, I don't know, about 10 million different individual job, or was it 37 million? Anyway, it was a lot. It was millions of raw job titles that were distinct from each other. We whittled that down to 75,000, and that's about what's in the library currently. It updates every 2 weeks, so it's a dynamic language of reflecting what we see in the labour market. But also, of those, about 10,000 titles are commonly used. A little tricky, different countries use them differently, different companies use them differently. So if you compared, what we're seeing here, which is right across India, but if you did that switch between companies, you might see different titles coming through. And so that, again, what language are you using to talk about these things to your audience? This is giving you the right language. So you don't just need to be talking about, if you want a marketing career, you can be more specific. And I've just given the top results here, and you in the tool you can expand through all of these. So you can think about, when we talk about job titles, and you're thinking about things as well like skills, which I'll come to next, think about these things as a kind of currency in your language. There isn't a lot of differentiation at course title level. There is a lot of differentiation, as I've just been explaining, with job titles, certainly with skills as well. Our skills taxonomy, I think it's about 32,000 individual skills that are in that. So that gives you a far greater range of language to be using when communicating with these markets. And by seeing, well, which ones are most prevalent in the data, that tells you, well, which elements of that currency are going to have the most value. And it might be different according to who you're talking to, but you can explore which currency to use for which group, so you can segment with your language as well. So that is useful. So I talked about skills. So let's look at the skills marketers say they use in India, and we can see some here. Now, of course, I'm taking the top line of those, so it's not surprising. The ones that we're seeing, you know, SEO, research, digital marketing, social media marketing. That's not surprising, perhaps, in terms of what the skills are, but it's then making the comparisons between what it might look like in one market with another. If you are doing a broad campaign, then seeing where the alignment is across multiple markets, where the same things have high value, that transferability across markets. Again, what are the things that you need to be emphasizing because they're so important right across the board, is something that you can draw out. And again, when you're describing your courses, this language is really, really powerful because it's going to connect more meaningfully with people. And the thing is, if you, I know I said this doesn't replace what is happening in terms of the kind of partnership recruitment that people do. But if we think about that for a moment, when nearly all of those instances of recruitment involve local counsellors on the ground who connect with the students, even if you're working with pathway companies, often what they're doing is managing multiple local agencies that work with kind of international education counsellors. How knowledgeable are those counsellors about this kind of thing, about labour market data, about skills for different professions in different markets? Do they have access to that? Are they able to have those kinds of conversations with students? I'm pretty confident it's unlikely. There may be some, but given the profile of people who tend to do those jobs, often very young, and they can build good relationships with other young people, do they have the tools at their disposal to be able to talk about these things? And so this is where, yes, there may be some great relationships that your competitors may have on the ground, but are those relationships really exploiting the insights that you can have, you can provide people from understanding the labour market that these people are trying to tap? That in the end, this is an investment for them, often a very expensive investment, and they're making that investment because they think the employment outcome later will be better for them. So if you can speak more closely to that, that can give you leverage against those relationships on the ground. Of course, if you're the one with relationships on the ground, perhaps you can empower people with some of these insights as well. Those were hard skills. I should also just give you a look at the common skills. Nothing too surprising what we see here, and common skills for us include soft skills, but these are the kind of skills that we see commonly, hence the name, across multiple occupations. And so we put those together, and that also indicates they're transferable, they're highly transferable. And of course you would explore this further, but it's useful to be able to see what are the things that people highlight when they're in these kind of roles in particular markets. We can take it further. So I've here used profiles data as a way to show the kind of things we can look at, but as I said, we also have job postings data. So if we move across and think about France, and if we go back to the other thing we looked at right at the beginning, because I think when we were looking at significant markets for analysts and data scientists, I think Paris was right at the top, along with London. So I thought, well, let's have a look at some of the job postings data for that. But let's focus it down. Let's look at analysts and data scientists being recruited who will need Python programming skills in France. So it's a way that we could dig down. We've identified an interesting market. We have maybe a short course or a module that we want to repurpose as a short online course to take into that market. We can be agile in that way. We can use digital marketing to connect with these people. Let's see what we can find out about what's happening. So we've got our what basically the headlines for the data that we have here. And let's take that a bit further. So we can see the job posting trends there. We've got a relatively reliable increase. We could see kind of the impact of COVID and early 2020, a big drop in hiring, but since then one or two dips, but pretty much a steady upward trend in people needing that skill in that data and analysis type role. So we can see that, and then we could also then start to consider things like oh, didn't want to do that. There we go. And then we can start to do things like, well, see which are the companies who are recruiting for these roles. So which companies need analysts and data scientists who have Python as a skill, and we can see the top companies that are recruiting in France. We can see what the other skills they're looking for, and clearly we got Python at the top because I've limited the search to only looking at those postings, job postings that have Python. But we can also think about, well, let's aggregate the rest of the skills that they're asking for and rank them, and that's what we've got on the left hand side. So SQL, machine learning, Java, and so forth. We got R there as well, and then on the right hand side we're comparing that with what we see in our equivalent profiles data, and those of you who use our UK analyst tool will be familiar with this chart, because we do exactly the same thing where we compare citations in job postings with citations of skills in profiles of the same or equivalent set, same parameters, same occupation applied, same skill filter applied, and what that gives us is a sense of where the skills gaps might be, but also it might be where there's a skills articulation gap as well. So that's worth bearing in mind. So there's a whole raft of different data that can be looked at, can be interpreted for thinking about where you might deploy different courses, short courses, executive courses, master's courses, online provision. It doesn't have to be online. It could be about recruiting people to the campus as well. There are different ways of deploying this data, but it gives you a sense of what is available when you're looking at more than one market, and when you're trying to make decisions about where to put your focus, and giving you an evidence base for those decisions, and keeping up to speed. You know, it's not just, you know, in the UK where we talk about graduate outcomes. That's a very important thing for international students, and it's a big topic right across the world. It's not just here, and to be able to speak to that and be able to speak to it with authority is helpful. So if anyone happens to be interested in learning more, we have a web page that goes into a bit more detail about this. So when you receive the slides afterwards, you'll have the link here on this slide, but of course you can get in touch with me directly. I'm very happy to walk you through the data and tools so you can see for yourself what it looks like. So that's really all I wanted to cover. I don't know if there have been any questions at all, Debbie?
No, Richard, thank you. You're very efficient, and as usual, no questions.
Well, great. And just say thank you very much, everyone, for joining. I'd be delighted to explore this data with you in a bit more depth, because we've looked across quite a wide range of different things in the seminar and in the webinar. And as I said at the beginning, I haven't anticipated every single question that these could be answering either. So I'd certainly be interested to get your feedback in how you might deploy the data. I know there are a few of you on this webinar who are using the data exactly for that. I'm always interested to understand how you've been able to use it and get value from it. So do let us know, and I think I'll call it a day there. Thank you very much for joining us.